So here we're going to look at a linear graph that shows Billy Bob Bob's sister Sally paints portraits of people for a living. And this graph below shows us how much she charges based on how long it takes her to paint the portrait. So down here at the bottom we have our x-axis, which is represented by the number of hours it takes to do the painting. And then we have our y-axis, which are her fees, or how much money she charges. So the first thing we are asked is, what is the slope of this graph and what does it represent? So let's remember that whenever we are talking about slope, we are talking about our change in y divided by our change in x. Change in y divided by our change in x. And typically in a word problem, the slope is going to be the rate of change, or some kind of a unit rate of sorts. And so to find this, let's get grounded a little bit in this graph, and let's pick a couple points that we can start working with. I'm going to pick points again that are exactly on my coordinate grid, so I don't have to do any guessing, any estimating. I don't have to work with any decimals, any fractions. So I'm going to pick this point right here where x is 0 and y is 50. And then I'm going to work with this point right here where x is 2 and y is 100. I'm going to calculate my slope. So I'm going to start with my change in y. So from my bottom point to my top point, I'm really only moving up 1 unit. But that 1 unit represents adding 50 because my scale is in 50s. So my change in y is a positive 50. And then my change in x, I move over 1 unit and 2 units. And each of those do represent 2 or 1 hour. So if I move 2 units, that is 2 hours. So my change in x is 2, which means that my slope, which we write as m is going to equal 25. And what this represents on this graph is the charge per hour. My y is my charge, my x is my hours, y divided by x. So this is going to be a $25 per 1 hour. Or you can say that Sally charges $25 per hour. Okay, so there's my slope. And I'm just going to highlight my m in there because I'm going to need that for writing my equation in y equals mx plus b form. So my slope is 25. So now I'm going to look for my y-intercept. So let me clear off some of these scribbles. And let's look for our y-intercept. So again, my y-intercept is where the line of my graph crosses my y-axis. So here's my y-axis, and here's the point where that line crosses. So that is my y-intercept, and that is the point 0, 50. So let me write that down over in my answer. So my y-intercept is 0, 50, or when x is 0, y is 50. And in this case, since x is hours and y is money, that means that in x hours, she charges $50. I'm sorry, in 0 hours. So in 0 hours, she charges $50. That would be her like flat rate. Or before anything else happens, it's like the base rate. You have to pay this initial fee of $50, and then every hour she works, it's $25 more. So we write our y-intercept as b equals the y-coordinate of that intercept, so our b is going to be a positive 50. Let me highlight that in green because we need that again for our equation. So m is a positive 25, b is a positive 50. Now we can write our equation. So remember, we write our equations in y equals mx plus b format, where m is our slope and b is our y-intercept. So in this case, y, the amount of money she charges, is equal to our slope of $25 per x, the amount of hours she works, plus our y-intercept, which is the $50 startup fee. And we can now use this equation to find out what the y, the charge, would be for any number of hours to have Sally paint a portrait for us. So when I write this as a sentence, again, I like to start with my y-intercept, because that's kind of our starting point, and then work backwards in terms of writing about this paragraph or this equation. But you can really write it anyway. You might be like, Sally charges a $50 flat rate or a $50 startup fee. I'll say maybe deposit. How about that? Sally charges a $50 deposit. And then $25 per hour. For her painting. And we can see that all of the elements of our equation are represented there. We have our slope represented. There's that 25 per hour. We have our y-intercept represented. There's that initial $50 deposit. We have our x, or number of hours, represented. There it is, per hour. And we have our y represented, which is our total charge. This next slide is kind of just a bonus, but I ask you, how would the graph be different if she made $40 an hour instead of $25 an hour? And this is really just describe what the line would look like if our rate was increasing by 40 an hour instead of 25 an hour. Some things you might be able to say is our line would be steeper. It would be a greater incline. It'd be rising faster per hour. And what would the new equation be if she made $40 an hour? Well, in our previous one, we saw that she was making $25 an hour, and that was our slope. So at $40 an hour, it would have a different slope. It would be y equals $40 per hour plus that initial $50 startup fee. So really just trying to drive in the idea that that multiplier, that number that multiplies our x, is our slope, is our unit rate, our rate of change, so many things. Okay.